Welcome back to another episode of the F1 Talking Points podcast. Today it is just me and Matt, a little bit of a more casual evening talking about the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Matt said that he's got a beer, so that's how casual it is today.
We're taking a step back, slowly to see. But yeah, Tomo has been doing a load of stuff with Sky Sports, and Hayden is away. We're all going to be back here next week because it's going to be the final race. It's going to be a good old, it's going to be one of our last big ones, obviously, because we're going to have then the huge old break. So you got that to look forward to. But today, yep, you just stuck with us two mugs.
Well, the good news is we might be mugs, but luckily we have a banger of a race to talk about. I'm going to go and say almost maybe the race of the season in terms of all of the randomness from start to finish. Obviously a sprint weekend as well. We're going to jump straight into my first talking point right at the beginning of the weekend, and it's got to be Kevin Magnussen's pole position. What a moment. I feel like the reason why I think this was just amazing is that I feel like 2022, as much as we did have a good battle at the beginning of the season, there wasn't that much randomness. When we think about 2021, we had Esteban Ocon winning a race. We had Lando Norris on pole position for Sochi. So there was, Daniel Ricciardo obviously winning as well. So there was so many kind of crazy moments even outside of Mercedes and Red Bull. But this season, it's been a bit of a struggle for the guys in the midfield. It's only been Lando on the podium outside of the top three teams. So to see Kevin Magnussen set that pole position, I know the circumstances, with George Russell obviously bringing out kind of the red flag for a little bit.
Forget that. No.
Forget about that.
Yes, there's 10 other drivers, 9 other drivers who had the same opportunity and they didn't take it, and Kevin Magnussen was the one who took it. It's the exact same scenario with George Russell at Spa when it got rained out. He got it in when he was meant to. That's how it works out. But yeah, as you're saying, mate, it was so cool to see.
I mean, that video, do you know what? The thing I think about is not the lap and even the pole position. It's that video when it was the timer is counting down. They know no one is going to go on the track because no one can even improve. And then you just see the joy on K-Mag's face, his eyes going crazy, him just bobbling in the car.
Man. There must be such a weird feeling because it's so benign to have, a driver be in the actual garage and being able to celebrate with their team, because obviously as soon as they do their lap, they'll hear if they're currently P1 or what have you, do their in lap, and then they kind of wait. But as it was, the weather conditions got a lot worse. I mean, I love this one that he just stayed in the car until the very last moment, just before he's right, no one else is on track, I've definitely won this. And then that classic shot of him, getting on top of his car and sort of proper cheering. It was so cool to see. And obviously we all knew that coming into the sprint race, no, he's not going to keep that. He's not going to win the race basically, because we know the actual, when it comes to normal racing conditions, Haas doesn't perform as well as the other cars. But for that one day, it's something that I think both Kevin Magnussen really deserved, because he also, before this pole lap, he was doing amazingly well during qualifying. Really, I mean, yeah, he got into
pace, no doubt.
Yeah, he got into Q3, and it's insane to see this. And it's really good for the actual Haas team as well, because they've been working so hard in the background, and they've been dealt a short straw. They don't have all the finances there, so when you do have a crash or what have you, they do have to repair carbon fiber, and it's not always the best case scenario for them. And this season, it's been such a weird one for them. Coming into Bahrain, they had such a great sort of outing, and then it kind of dipped off a bit. But then to get this, I mean, for the team, I think the morale side of things, they don't care about the results for the next 2 days. Just getting that is so special.
I do also think it was kind of Mick in the end had a kind of a really good sprint, and then, the race kind of petered away. But I do find it ironic that K-Mag was on pole and Mick was in P20. It must have been so difficult mentally for Mick.
Yeah.
I feel really bad. But no, it was just such a great moment, because again, I feel like we haven't had that midfield craziness and randomness in 2022. So it really did feel like a throwback. But yeah, it was great to see. And also, I mean, in the sprint, he did kind of get a point. I know the race, well, he got taken out. Your boy took him out. Unbelievable. I mean, sack Daniel Ricciardo immediately. But no, obviously it was a bit of a collision. It was a bit of a collision in the end, but at least he still got a point out of the weekend. And I mean, his first pole position, I believe that was there was a stat for he has the most races to actually get a pole position. So yeah, absolute madness.
Does this count then as a pole position because it was pole position for the sprint qualifying, which then the results for that would then be the actual... Yeah.
They changed it for this year. Yeah.
I mean, I would count that as still being called a pole position. It was still a qualifying session. I mean, come at me. I don't care. I mean, I might have said something different.
I think it's better this way, by the way. I definitely, because last year it was confusing where pole position was the person who won the sprint race, but pole position should be the person who sets the quickest time over one lap.
Yeah.
So I feel like they did it the right way this year. So historically now, he is now a pole sitter. So yeah, but that was my first talking point. I just feel like it was, we didn't know what was to come, in the race, but it was just a teaser of the amazing kind of Grand Prix weekend we had at Sao Paulo. So yeah, K-Mag on pole in a Haas, seeing that team, seeing his, I think it was his wife and his daughter as well, like they were buzzing as well. So
love it.
Yeah, just the good feeling all around.
A real quick one on that. I'll ask you this, because obviously the question, before I go on to my talking point, the question will be out there. Sprint races, yes or no? I'm still not a fan of them. I do think this was a really great example of what sprint races can do. But obviously, if this was like a normal qualifying session, normal qualifying would have been just completely bone dry. We wouldn't have this mix up of, guys going out onto the dry compound first, or, you guys in Q3 having to get out as quickly as they can. And it actually meant like they did properly capitalize on this weekend. So I'm still in the camp of, I'm not a fan of sprint races, but has this sort of swayed you to go into team yes or team no?
I mean, to be fair, I think it's completely dependent on the track that you do the sprint race. Like that's the sprint weekend and the sprint format lives and dies by whatever track you choose. And I feel like this weekend, I mean, Sao Paulo is one of the best like tracks in the world. Easily one of the top 5 tracks for racing in Formula One. It always delivers, and it was the perfect one. I even feel like from the Mercedes and Red Bull and Ferrari side, the fact that there was only one FP1 session before the cars went into Parc Fermé, it seemed like that affected Red Bull more than anyone else. They weren't kind of able to really kind of get their car in that window so that they kind of maximize the performance and had that advantage that they've been having over the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. So I feel like it was a combination of the track and everything. So yeah, it was definitely a big thumbs up, I think, for the sprint, because it kind of worked all round. I mean, yeah, if we had qualifying on the Saturday, also with Brazil, of course, the weather. That's why we had the wet session, because on the Sunday it was bone dry. So yeah, I think this is a big kind of plus point to the sprint, but we know that it's all dependent on the tracks. And I feel like whether we would have had a sprint or not, the race would have still been a banger. So I feel like it's more on Sao Paulo than the sprint, but it was definitely the sprint definitely shook things up a little bit.
And maybe that's what they look in future, where they want to do sprint races is probably more of like, okay, well, if we know we're going to get an amazing turnout, like Sao Paulo or, Zandvoort, and we don't know we've done previous ones that, at Monza, it's like, okay, well, what's going to be the best bang for buck for these huge audiences who we know every time we're going to come there, the atmosphere there is going to be electric. And, I think, this case in point where if you can get more racing out of a Formula One weekend, maybe somewhere like Sao Paulo, it actually works. Whereas somewhere, I'm trying to think of like, France, for example, might not be the best example of like where you should do a sprint race. I know we haven't done one there, but all things so. Anyway, on to my talking point then. Let's jump into the race. So many incidents happened. So let's start off with the first horrible one. And it breaks my heart because as soon as I saw it, I was like, there's no excuse for it. Daniel Ricciardo going into who we were just mentioning then, Kevin Magnussen. I mean, you see the on board. You can't really sort of defend it. I think basically it was just a misjudging of speed. Didn't expect Daniel Ricciardo didn't expect Kevin Magnussen to go into him. And I'm not putting any fault on Kevin Magnussen for rolling back to try and get out of the way. But then obviously that was tags both of them.
No, Matt, that's not good enough. You got to go full Ricciardo bias on this. It was all K-Mag's fault. Brake tested.
I'm not sure I can really. Yeah, if I was to like give a really false excuse, what would I say? Yeah, probably say that K-Mag probably broke too early, which he didn't do in previous sessions, and then him unrolling backwards was just unsafe. You shouldn't. As soon as you crash, you should have your feet firmly on the brakes there, and he
be right in the middle of the track of oncoming traffic.
And he wiped out a previous race winner, and that's just really disrespectful of K-Mag. But yeah, I think it was pretty clear cut. That it was unfortunately Ricciardo's fault, and he has now got a 3-place grid penalty for his last race in Abu Dhabi, which I know I'm probably going to cry at, like not him getting the grid penalty, but it's because it's going to be his last race. But mate, there was so many. I think my talking point is basically like the opening lap shenanigans, I should say, because obviously there's not too much we can talk about with Daniel Ricciardo. It was very much clear.
Even the Lando and Charles, I think, collision. Yeah, I think that was on the next lap.
Yeah, that was on the was that on the race restart after the safety car from I
believe so. Yeah.
So then let's talk about that one then, because I feel like with the Daniel Ricciardo one, that's pretty much like, yep, that's the fact. He got the penalty, pretty clear. With the Lando and Charles Leclerc one, I was surprised at Lando with that, because it looked like he just sort of understeered into Leclerc, and I was really surprised that actually Leclerc didn't come off more worse from that. But what was your take on it?
I can't believe Leclerc survived. Like, he hit the wall quite hard, and that car still kind of, made it out. And to be fair, he went on to have a great race. I think finished in 4th in the end. So, yeah, from that kind of position, I think that was a really good race by Leclerc, to be fair. But, yeah, it was one of those moves where I think Lando, he did deserve some space, but also you're in a McLaren, you're being overtaken by a Ferrari. I feel like it was so late from Leclerc in terms of, like, he was going around the outside. He was committed. And maybe Lando should have backed out earlier. Like, you're not going to be fighting the Ferrari too much, to be honest. But, Lando's had such a great season. It's kind of difficult to really kind of, pick on him a little bit too much. But I think in the end, again, I think Leclerc had a really good race. I genuinely thought Leclerc's out. He's binned it. He's gone. He's done.
Yeah.
And yet, he fought back. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good race. But I'm glad that Leclerc tried it. We want to see these kinds of moves. I feel like Lando did get kind of pinched on the inside, and he was I think Lando was kind of half committed to defending it, and he went on the curb and ultimately just understeered into Leclerc. So, yeah, but I did like, there's a really nice image actually of when Leclerc's in the wall. I think he like flips the bird up at Lando or something like that.
I think as soon as he goes in, his hands naturally go up and being like, "Whoa, what the hell?" Sort of what's going
jokes.
on. But then, I mean, I was really surprised actually that Leclerc didn't like break his suspension. So he went in like front first, I believe. Obviously, that's why he had to change the front wing. But I was really surprised that the suspension didn't break, or it's kind of one of the few times when the Ferrari car hasn't just crumbled in on itself. But like, I think it just sort of goes to show like that one of the reasons this track is so good is that you can have like, those type of incidents, and it doesn't really then affect many other people. I mean, like there was plenty of runoff wet there, not using gravel, and he was able to actually resort back absolutely fine. And to fair with Lando as well, when the race starts happened, I think he sent it down the inside of, I think it might have been Perez, and he had to go on the turn 1, sorry, and he had to go fully onto the curb. And fair play, he didn't like make any contact or have any collisions there. But I mean, like I like seeing that from Lando, being a bit feisty, trying to just trying to capitalize on those positions early on, and then then later on in the race see how things develop. But yeah, I think this has been the most sort of action I think we've seen in the first few laps, I think, at Interlagos, where we're having like safety car, then another virtual safety car, then safety car, and it was all a bit just all a bit newer a little bit, because normally it's just hard racing we've seen later on, but this I think the first time we've actually just seen a load of race action. But right, let's go on to your next talking point then.
I mean, it's got to be the repeat of 2021, Lewis versus Max Part 2. Do you know what? I'm actually going to throw it over to you. That's my talking point, but I'm going to throw it over to you first. What did you think when you saw that? Because, I mean, it just had to be those two, didn't it?
I think I watched it, and I was... because I've been of the very firm belief of, like, most of the season, there's been loads of people saying, the Mercedes, it's going to bounce back, and it's going to, like, be on the same level as, like, Red Bull. And I've always been like, it's not. There's clearly been a design flaw here. They're not doing that at all. And to their credit, they've been proving me wrong, noticeably this weekend, when obviously they've won it. But this is obviously the first time when they've actually sort of properly sort of charged through and had confidence being in the lead.
They had the pace as well. Like they genuinely had the quickest car, I think.
Absolutely. And so when I saw the whole like, Lewis and Max all coming together, I was a bit like, okay, it's going to be one of those clear passes. Everyone's been like, yeah, everything's all fine. But then, honestly, into turn 1, I'm just like, guys, what is going on? And my stance on it is, it's a racing incident. Like, both of them could have, like, I think, like, Lewis did leave enough space, because I know there's going into the terminology of like, okay, well, Lewis was ahead into this corner, but then Max technically was ahead into the second corner, so therefore he deserved the corner, but then Max did understeer, but then he was also only half on the curb, and he's still, it's all these sort of different parameters. So in that case, for me, that's why I'm saying this is like a racing incident. And I think in this, like, what they were saying afterwards, I think Lewis said something along the lines of like, oh, classic Max, and Max did a retort as well. And it's just a bit like, boys, you're just as bad as each other here. Like, I mean, like, if you don't get the move done into that first corner, you both know you've got another DRS straight literally on the next couple corners, and then you could just finish it up there. And it's just, I'm surprised there wasn't more damage on Lewis's car. I know his wheel cover came off, so it was weird to actually see Lewis have like a front right car without any sort of, you just seeing the rims.
Yeah, that was a bit odd actually. That was crazy.
I mean, I quite liked it, to be fair. It looked quite cool. I thought, like, oh, we're getting like a new Pirelli test going on here. But what's your stance on it? Because I'm very much like, yeah, it's a racing incident. I know, obviously, Max then got the 5-second penalty for that, which I was a bit like, okay, well, they had to do some ruling, but I would have just said racing incident. I'm glad it wasn't like a will be investigated after the race kind of thing.
I mean, for me, the problem is that at the beginning, and I remember we actually had this conversation, I believe it was after Silverstone and Austria, like me and you had a little bit of a, let's call it a debate, a little, little argument.
A discussion.
Yeah, a discussion about the rules of engagement and how they've changed in 2022. So by the new, and I'm not saying like, to me it was a racing incident, it is what it is. It was two drivers who are not backing out, and especially when it comes to Lewis and Max, there's so much history that they're always going to come together now. It's simple as that, because they're so unwielding and they're so, when they see each other, they race each other differently. It's as simple as that. Now, in terms of the penalty and Max, I do think it was more of a racing incident, but I also understand why they gave Max the penalty. I'm not saying I agree with it, but the racing guidelines that the FIA set out at the beginning of the year, whether you love them or you hate them, you don't have to give racing room to anyone unless you are literally side by side going into the corner. And the problem is Max, even though he was kind of ahead going into the first part of the corner, in terms of the right-hander, because it's obviously like a 1-2 down the center S's, when it actually came to the corner where they collided, Max was not side by side until they actually made contact. So
yeah,
but that's where and I called the rules into question, like at the beginning of the season when we talked about it. Like even when Max, I remember, squeezed Mick Schumacher off, and I think there was one in Austria, maybe with like Lando and Perez or something. Like I think that people deserve more racing room, but by what the stewards have said and the precedent that they set at the beginning of the season, now they're going by this almost, you have to be side by side. If you're behind, you don't have to give any racing room, whatever, which I think is actually wrong, because there's got to be a bit of leeway. If you've got your car, half alongside someone, you deserve racing room, but that's not the precedent that has been set by the FIA. So the moment Lewis got his nose ahead of Max, that he didn't actually technically have to give Max any racing room, and that gap that Max was going into was always going to close. So I understand, to me it was more of a racing incident, but I also understand why they gave Max a 5-second penalty. Now, are these the rules that, we should be kind of... Yeah. Are these the right rules of engagement? I don't know, but that's what the FIA started at the beginning of the year. Like, whether it's right or wrong, I think that's a different discussion, to be honest.
And I think that's where, the lines do then get blurry. Like you mentioned there with Austria, with Lando and Perez, it's like, well, that's one corner you can look at, but we're going down the center S's, which you could be like, okay, that's like multiple sort of chicanes going down. It's like, okay, well, you have to.
It's kind of two corners in one.
Yeah,
really.
It's like, okay, so this is the ruling for the ruling goes onto the first corner here, but then onto the second corner. You weren't side by side, but then Max then does dive a little bit and tries to hold position, and then it goes into that, and that's where it gets all confusing. So you have to set the precedent, like you said, of Max getting the penalty, or one of them had to get the penalties. If you got the onboard footage, you're following what's going on. For me, I was like, it was too quickly for me to judge, because I'm just a simple folk. So I can't really figure that out. But yeah, it's such a weird one again. So, because whenever we hear they always race each other sort of differently, or what you were sort of mentioning before, I always see that as a bit of that's a bit of theatrics. No, it's absolutely fine. But in actual case, I'm a bit like, no, actually seeing this, no, they really can't behave one another, and it's so silly and a bit childish. But if we now go on to the next talking point, I'm going to jump ahead chronologically in terms of the timeline, and we can jump back to other things in the race. So I'm going to jump now to the very end of the race, keeping it talking about Max Verstappen here.
Oh boy.
Not letting Perez
British bias
back through. Right, let's have a chat about this one then. So for those who don't know, obviously in the race, Max was told to let Perez through, and that's to help Perez out in terms of the championship position, because obviously Max is wrapped up his championship, Red Bull wrapped up his championship.
And this is for P6, by the way.
This is for, P6, yeah. It's been a bit of a shit show for the Red Bull team entirely this weekend. But yeah, it's just all to help the driver basically get higher up in the rankings, because Sergio Perez is still... It's still all up in the air for him to try and get higher into the drivers.
Him and Leclerc are now level on points, by the way.
Exactly that, and that's the reason why the team asked Max to let Checo through, and then we get this classic radio message come through from Max after the race, because Red Bull I was saying let him through at turn 12, I believe, repeatedly saying it to him. radio silence from Max. As soon as it goes past the checkered flag, then it'd be like, right, what happened there? And Max was like, I've already told you guys, you don't ask me this again. And very much made it like stern at like, he doesn't want to be asked to let someone come through again. And Perez had his response on his radio. It's for me, and I know people are drawing parallels to this to Mexico, because I think there's some people making out this outlandish sort of thing that, that Perez crashed on accident in qualifying.
Monaco.
In Monaco, not Mexico, sorry, my apologies. In Monaco, which that's just complete bullshit. Like there's been drivers before who have crashed on purpose during a race. We have matured. I would hope at least the championship has matured since then, and no driver I would think in this era would crash on purpose just so then their teammate
Nico
doesn't
Rosberg went wide only in 2014, and Schumacher crashed on purpose in only 2006. So it's not like as if we're like miles ahead.
I said in this era. In my defense, I said in this era, so that's still prior 2014. But yeah, like some people have been claiming it's because of what happened in Monaco. I'm just calling that complete BS. But for me, I'm so disappointed with Max in this one. Like, absolutely, be a team player. I mean, what ego do you need to have to not help out your teammate, especially with all the help Perez has done in the previous season and this season to help?
So what was his
Max's
reason then? He said I gave you my reason. What was it then?
So I reckon then it's something to do with the ego of being like, no, if I'm going to be your number one driver, you should never belittle me to helping out someone else. You should always have it like, if you can't pass me in on the track, therefore you can't be better than me. That's my assumption of this, because if you're coming through with sounding a bit angry on the radio, saying don't ask me this again, as if like they've already had a conversation like this before, that's kind of my interpretation, that he might have this thing of like, all right, well, if you can't pass me on the track, then I'm not going to let you through. But what's your interpretation of it? Because yeah, for me, I'm just very much like, mate, that's just not on. Don't care if you're the world champion. Just, it's a team sport as well, and like that's where you could have helped out your teammate, and you're physically just making it harder for him when he's helped you out so much in the past.
So this is 100% about Monaco.
Oh really? You think
yeah.
It's Monaco?
Yeah, no, I'm 100%. Yeah, it's 100%. So basically, after the race, there was some journalists, actually a Dutch journalist, said that allegedly Perez did actually, and I've looked at the footage back, and I'm not gonna lie, I do think actually Perez potentially crashed on purpose. But
do you actually think that?
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll send. Don't worry, Matt. I'll send you the video. I'm literally now editing a video about that.
I'm very interested to hear all this, because I know loads of people have now gone back to the onboards to rewatch it and stuff. I haven't. I've been traveling anyway, and also it's literally the day after. So I mean, give me some clearance. But
I think knowing now what I do,
yeah.
knowing now what I do, and looking back at clean laps, Perez's first run in Q3 actually, where he was P3, and looking at the crash. And looking like just hearing the throttle application, I'm saying that there's a definite possibility that he crashed on purpose, because he was ahead of Max, and at the time he was fighting for the world championship with Leclerc and Max. Like, let's just remember this was at the beginning of the season. They were within 25 points of each other, three drivers. So I'm saying that there's a potential that Perez did actually do it on purpose because of like where the throttle application is. But the rumor actually that came out after the race, and it was actually a Dutch journalist that said it first, is that Perez basically, because the team had the data, and Max is also not an idiot and he saw it as well, and just keep in mind, they've done millions of laps on the sim, millions of laps around Monaco. Basically, Perez admitted apparently to both Helmut Marko and Christian Horner that, I mean, he kind of had to because everyone had the data, that he kind of did do it on purpose. And so Max had that in his mind, because ultimately Max wasn't allowed to set a quicker time. He was extremely frustrated. And because Perez was the leading Red Bull, even though they qualified third and fourth, the leading Red Bull won the race because of Ferrari. So potentially Max felt like he had a win stolen from him because he would have gone quicker than Perez. Now, what's really important here is that I actually also asked I actually asked two different journalists, friends of mine, if this was genuinely a rumor that was like in the paddock. Like, did people know that Perez admitted it? And they basically said it wasn't an open secret, but they have both of them in like, they don't know each other. Both of them said that they heard rumblings and rumors, apparently. Someone actually heard it from a person at Mercedes, that Perez actually admitted to the team, because no one at the team are idiots, like, if they look at the data. So, yeah, that's why Max fell away, and that's what he meant on the team radio when he said, we spoke about it before the race. And basically, he told the team that, after what Perez did, I am not going to let him through, but like, for some points. And that's why he made that kind of statement in terms of I told you before, and I'm not going to let him through. So, and also after the race, when he was speaking to Sky Sports, Rachel Brooks like literally asked him, "Is this about Monaco?" And he basically said he didn't deny it. He said, "You decide for yourself." And then he gave like a little smile. So he didn't deny it flat out. And Christian Horner also didn't he was kind of like pushing the blame more onto how, they had a bad weekend, like not talking about the entire incident. So yeah, this is definitely about Monaco and Max still keeping a grudge about what happened. And I'm just surprised that we haven't heard this before because
same. That's why I'm coming in. That's why I'm coming into this basically being like, I'm thinking it was complete BS basically, and obviously I'm not that educated with what you've just mentioned there because I'm learning this for the first time. Because also in my mind,
spend more time on F1 Twitter, mate. They know everything.
Well, no, for me then it's basically like, and if it wasn't an open secret in the paddock, which most of the time, that like Nico Hulkenberg like going back into Haas is an open secret. But it's not been confirmed by anyone, neither the team or the drivers. But in the paddock, it's an open secret, yada yada. Whereas with this, it's kind of like the first time we've kind of really heard about this. And then why would then a journalist find out about that rather than anything? Just one journalist. I think his name's Eric or something like that. And I'm not.
It was Tom. First of all, it was Tom Coronel who said it first, and he's also Dutch on Viaplay. And then a journalist basically, said that, Tom said that, and he retweeted it. And then that's when I asked like other people, like, have you actually heard this in the paddock before? And they said, yeah, months ago, but only like little rumblings. No one actually, talked about it. But this was something that was like in the paddock a little bit, which I was surprised about.
Well, that's just, egg on my face, isn't it? It's this sort of thing. If it is apparently true, like crashing on purpose. But that's madness, though. Like the fact that you're also holding a grudge, then in that case, this long until the end of the championship is a bit like
for P6, and you hold all the way from Monaco. Max has been holding this grudge, and he felt like now he needed to kind of make a statement to the team, like, almost get even. And to me, that's the real, the Monaco thing is, again, no one knows 100% if Perez did or didn't, but Max feels like he did. Max felt annoyed after that, frustrated, but the fact that he's held that grudge all the way, like, till now, that to me is not right. And especially the way he chose to kind of deploy his frustration there instead of do it behind the scenes. And ultimately, he's made the team look bad. He's made Perez also look bad because Perez then Perez also got in his emotions and started saying, well, Max's champions are also, Max's 2 championships are also because of me. And that's also not true. You're not, Perez also needed to calm down a little bit. The adrenaline was running. So everyone was frustrated. Everyone looks bad, all because Max decided for some reason to lash out his frustrations out in the open in this race for P6, which is, to me, it was a massive miscalculation and big mistake by Max.
Yeah, and there's also just a bit like it's kind of weird now where we can look back at previous races and then kind of now know that like Max has had a little grudge on his teammates since then, and it's just kind of a bit of it kind of leaves this weird like sort of bitter taste in your mouth of just like, okay, so is the relationship not good there? And like also, Christian Horner sort of saying, oh yeah, they've shaken hands and everything's all fine. It's like, well, that can't be right then. If the case has been since Monaco and the team have known that, then like that can't be sort of, anyway, we move on to it. So what's your next talking point?
Well, apart from all of the Red Bull madness, come on, the man of the hour, King Russell, Georgie boy getting his first win. It was, do you know what was good about this win is that he did not luck into it. I know there was a bit of, crashing in a Q3 tax, but he still got the job done in the sprint to then end up on pole position for the race, even though it wasn't pole position, but you know what I mean. But in the race, this was not a straightforward race. There was so much thrown at him. Obviously, he nailed the start of the race. Then there was safety car restarts left, right, and center. There was a late safety car just to add the pressure. He had Lewis right on his back. There was also some close moments with the strategy as well. He had to play his tyre wear just right because I think at one point he came out very, very close to Carlos Sainz. Like, he almost lost the lead of the race. So this was not a straightforward first win for George Russell. And finally, redemption after Sakir 2020. Hashtag robbed in Sakir. It was just amazing to see the outpour of emotion from the team and even Lewis as well. Like, that's a real team leader right there. Even Lewis was celebrating as if he just won the race as well because he feels proud of the team and how much they've developed throughout the year. And I just feel I'm just so happy for George because I always knew this was in there. He has gone through a rough patch, but this is a man that I've touted. Even when he was having his rough patch, I kept saying this is still a guy who to me is going to be a world champion. So yeah, I'm just very happy for him to get his first win and also for Mercedes to to not have a winless year. I mean, so yeah, all round, just incredible, just incredible.
Yeah, and I think it was so nice to like sort of hear his sort of radio. You know, he's crying over the radio, and he's had such like as you mentioned, like an up down sort of journey with Mercedes. You know, like Sakir, like his first outing replacing Lewis when he had COVID, and all of us were like, yeah, he should have won that race, but just the mess up they had there, unfortunately, the cars were just
it's a conspiracy.
Like a big old conspiracy. But then, yeah, now he's got this full redemption arc. And I think what was really nice as well is that when he was getting interviewed at the very end, it kind of just goes to show, like, for all of us watching, how much dedication these guys have had to put into the sport, where he was like, I've been go-karting since I've been a kid, dreaming of being an F1 race winner. And there's still, you know, guys racing in Formula One who's been doing it a lot longer than he has, and still haven't had that chance yet, even to get a podium. But then for him to have all come in on his first season at Mercedes, where, you know, he came into the car and it wasn't what it was expected of him. You know, having this huge championship title fight and it's been dominant for the past 7 years. And it's the first year he's come in and a car hasn't been up to that level. And now that they've worked up to this massive crescendo to the end of the season, where, yeah, you're not going to win the championship, you're not going to be the title contender, but you've got your first race win under your bag. You've got that sort of massive weight off your shoulders now, and to see that motion from him, you know, unravel, being like, you know, he
was crying, man. He was in tears.
He was crying.
It was
he FaceTimed Toto Wolff at the very end in the cool down room, which I thought was quite funny as well. Because this is the first weekend where one of the first weekends where Toto Wolff has not been in the paddock, because he's wanting to take a few races back, you know, to just sort of not be there. I think after 2021, he was like, Toto Wolff's like, I just want to take a little step back and just for his own mental stability.
I think it was only the third race in his Mercedes career he's missed as well.
Yeah, and it just happens to be one of the best ones Mercedes won too. But yeah, no, I'm super ecstatic for him, and I'm just like, it really gets me excited to see what is going to happen next year. I do quite like it that he is the more feisty sort of driver between the two, because you've got Lewis, who is, you know, he's what he is. He's the full package, and with like Russell, he, on occasion this season, you know, he has bit off more than he can chew. But this in this scenario, this race weekend, yeah, he, apart from, you know, having his little donut celebration during qualifying after doing all those donuts in Las Vegas.
It was an early celebration. You know, he knew the win was coming. He had the vision.
Yeah, and I think, but then when it comes to the sprint race and to the actual race, yeah, he didn't do anything wrong, and fair play to him. It was so good. But then, right, on to my last talking point. Oh, I'm trying to figure out now what we can sort of really cover.
Talk about Daniel Ricciardo's crash again, I think.
No. We've been there and done that. We can go past it all. I think I'm trying to think what other ones we can sort of really go.
Do you need a bit of help, actually? Ferrari, Ferrari in quali.
Yeah, so I was going to talk about Ferrari, but the only reason I wasn't going to is because coming in the end of the race, they were P4 and P5. Okay,
Fernando Alonso versus Esteban Ocon, the teammate.
Yeah,
that was brilliant.
We'll leave that. We'll leave the Alpine one to your last one, or is it the last time?
That's it, yeah, mate. You've got one. You got to have.
All right, cool.
Let's
all right, let's talk about the Alpine then. Sorry, I thought we had one more. Then I thought that's what you were going to talk about. Right, let's go on to that real quick. Then we'll talk. Let's say, yeah, Alpine. Alonso just basically just shitting on Ocon in the interviews afterwards, being like, "Oh, I got one more." Because I think, I can't remember who journalist was, but basically it was like, "Oh, you're gonna have a chat afterwards. You're gonna try to," because basically they were pushing each other and not being fair basically during the sprint race, and basically someone was asking Alonso, "Oh, okay, you're gonna sort of try to leave this as it is, you're going to try and to build a relationship." Alonso's kind of like, nah, go on, more race, see you later till I'm off, kind of thing.
I didn't like that. I thought that's because in terms of what happened in the sprint, like the first collision, or the first kind of like almost collision, I think was Esteban Ocon's fault going into turn 3. He didn't give Fernando any space when they were side by side. Like, you know, Fernando was on the curb, like it was just, he almost like crashed into Ocon, like with the amount of curb he was taking. But then that second collision going, you know, up the hill, that was all Fernando, unfortunately. You know, he pulled out of the slipstream a little bit late. He was a bit indecisive where he was going left, right, and ultimately it was too late, and that was his fault. And then going in... But this is the frustration with Fernando, and like the crazy thing about him he drove an unbelievable race, but we saw the best and worst of Fernando Alonso this weekend. Like, going into the interviews, then blaming, blaming Ocon, and also saying things like, "Oh, well, I've only got one more race left with them," or something like that. That's not a good look.
I think on the radio he called him like a bad kid or something like that on the radio when just calling him a bad kid. It might be for someone else actually, but
it wasn't, but whatever. It wasn't right, especially then what he said, like, I've only got one more race with the team, and then I'm moving on or something like that. That's not. That is not a good look. And you compare that to the way, like, because obviously Seb also had a collision a little bit with his teammate Lance Stroll, like almost a collision, and like you compare the way Seb, reacted and the way he handled the situation, and the way Fernando is always going to be, a fire stick. He's always going to be a driver that you've got to control. But then in the race, finishing P5 in the end, it was absolutely unbelievable. Like, that's the frustration and that's the madness of Fernando Alonso. He's such a genius on track, but he's also kind of a bit of a loose cannon so much. Like, he produced from basically last on the grid, because obviously he was, at the end of the sprint, he had to obviously pit, and so he had to start like right at the back to fight his way up to P5. It just shows you how good of a driver he is, but he's still frustrating. He's still a frustrating driver at times, there's no doubt.
Yeah, one other aspect I do want to talk about, we'll quickly just cover off Ferrari before we go into the head-to-heads. I do want to have a quick chat about Ferrari, because although in the race, P4, P5, fair play to them, especially for Charles Leclerc, getting taken out
Actually,
by
no, P3, P4, Carlos on the podium.
Sorry, of course, I'm reading it wrong here. P3 and P4. Science, great battle for him to keep that position, and then, like Charles Leclerc fighting up the order. I do want to quickly talk about, though, qualifying and the sprint race, because my thoughts on this is very much like, I said it very much early in the season. I don't think Binotto is the right person for the job, and now it's got to the point where internally something needs to change there, because you can't just pin that all on Binotto, because we saw them mess up with the tires during qualifying. And just for that, it's just a bit like Charles Leclerc is also like giving them instructions throughout the season. We've seen as well. So my question is to you is like, do you think then we need to see some change in the new year? Because like for me, it's clear as day. We need to see some personnel change in Ferrari, because something's not working here. And I don't think I can't just pin it all on Binotto, but obviously he is the captain. So if your ship is going the wrong way, then you need to look at the person who's controlling it. You can't just blame, like the person steering it or what have you. So, but what's your thoughts on the sort of the Ferrari mess ups?
It was just frustrating to kind of see it again. Like the initial call to go on the Inters on Q3, like that was obviously a decision that Leclerc made with his team, or at least I hope Leclerc was part of the decision making. But that's not the big problem. They made the wrong call. Like, they should have been on dries, but it's the fact that they didn't pit straight away. Like, if they pitted straight away, Leclerc still would have had a lap. Like, but the fact that they still did not pit, and then, you have Xavi on the team radio basically, going to Charles, box, 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 as he's already halfway down the straight. And even Leclerc showed like his frustration. That was the really annoying part. But yeah, I think on the Binotto thing, I've still been the person that's been saying, I think he deserves 2023 to prove, like, this was the first year that he's brought Ferrari back to winning races, which is a challenge in itself. He's kind of bottled the championship along with his drivers, along with the team. Everyone, they're all part of a team. So, he bottled the championship along with the drivers in 2022, but he deserves one more season to prove that he can learn. Like, this is a learning year. He can learn and prove that he is the man to take Ferrari in terms of, the team principal in 2023. But to me, after that, he should be gone if he still can't deliver. At least, I'm not saying win the title, but a title challenge if they've got the car to do the job. And ultimately, they're almost getting caught up like by Mercedes. I've got to take a look at the championship now, but it's crazy looking at the beginning of the year, the fact that, potentially Mercedes might overtake Ferrari. So,
so going into on the standings, Ferrari is 524 points and Mercedes 505. So
19 points in it. 90. Are you joking me? Like, that's
madness.
That's crazy. So yeah, it's a bad one for Ferrari. There's already apparently rumors that Matteo Binotto might not be safe, but yeah,
really?
I think I'd still give him 2023 in my opinion. But after that, that's it. I think he deserves time because he's brought Ferrari back, but he's got to sort it out.
There's been so much focus on the actual car itself, but then not actually from the team personnel structure on site of like race strategies. 'Cause I think all of us will like, however you look at this, you can see that the strategy has not worked throughout the season. Like sometimes, yes, the car performance can dip and can rise. We see that with all races here. There is not one perfect Formula One car for every race and every track, out there. But always it's been the strategy, and seeing like this fumble and just these weird communication
I think it's just the chaos. It's not just the strategy, but just
madness.
the chaos over the team radio, the lack of management. Like, it's not just getting strategy wrong during the race, but just even simple stuff like the moment Leclerc went out on inters and they knew it was the wrong tyre. Why did he not box straight away? Why was the radio message too late? And there was also a shambolic video of like 3 different tyre changes for Leclerc as well, like that I shared on Twitter.
Yeah, because it was like originally it was new soft, and then it was a scrubbed in set, or vice versa, and then
they put the wrong set of softs on basically. But
it's madness. But right, shall we then get on to the head-to-heads? Which this segment is where we go through all the teams and we pick which is our star driver of the race. So let's then go to, we'll start off at the very top. Well, not at the very top. Oh no, at the very top for this race. Let's go with Mercedes then. Who are you going for your head-to-head driver?
It's got to be King Russell. I mean, it was just such a good performance all the way back from the sprint, fighting and overtaking Max, getting obviously a pole for the race, and then just the way he executed, that was a professional drive by someone. George looks like he's been fighting for world championships. Like, he was ice cool the way he handled the pressure, even late on as well, because he had Lewis chasing him. Like, Lewis could have, hunted him down, but he had the pace in hand, and it's got to be George.
Yeah, I've got to give it to George as well. And also a great weekend for Lewis. I know obviously the incident involving Max, silly, we'll move past that, but come at the end of the race, like he moved up the positions, and like you were mentioning there, he was closing in on Russell, and the team did say you are free to race, which I was a bit like, Bill flashbacks to Nico Rosberg a little bit there, and Hamilton Taze. I was so worried something was going to happen between them, not out of like a malicious intent or anything like that. But obviously, Lewis is obviously gunning to try and get keep his streak going of getting a win every season he's been in the sports. Which unfortunately, that's going to be Abu Dhabi. It's going to be breaking. But he was only like 1.5 seconds off from Russell at the very end there. But right then, let's go on to Ferrari. I'm just going down by race result in terms of teams. Carlos Sainz in P3 and Charles Leclerc P4. Who are you going for?
I'm going to go for Sainz. I think it wasn't the best week for Ferrari, but I feel like Carlos kind of had the edge over Leclerc. Obviously qualifying went the way it went. But yeah, Carlos I think did a really good job, especially they had a few little tyre issues during the race, but yeah, I think it's going to be Sainz.
Yeah, I've got to go Sainz as well. I mean, he came P2 in the sprint race, and I mean, it's very close with Leclerc because, like, although he had to charge up through. I think he went down to P14. I think after the little tap from Lando. So then to work up to that point is really good. But I think this track does really play into like the into overtaking. So if you've got the straight line speed, then you're sort of golden. Let's go on to then Alpine, Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon. Who are you going for?
Oh, I mean, it's still got to be Alonso. Like that recovery drive, from almost the back of the grid. I mean, he infuriates me sometimes. I think the way he handled the whole sprint situation in the media was wrong, but in terms of the race, like he was basically perfect. To get to P5, great result. Yeah,
I'm gonna agree with you there. No. You said exactly my points. There's nothing really on. I think Esteban did a really good job as well. Again, most underrated driver, I think, this season. He's doing such a great job at that team, but then no one's really sort of championing it. But yeah, unfortunately, those instances just a bit silly. Right, going on to Red Bull then. Who are you picking?
It's still Max, because ultimately I feel like he had the pace to come back. He was the quicker driver. I feel like Checo, actually, especially in the sprint, he was miles back. I don't know what, Checo didn't really have the pace, but yeah, I think the way it ended doesn't look great, but I'm still going to go with Max.
Okay, well, I'm going to go for Paris on this one.
Wrong.
That's why we have multiple people on this podcast, so we can all have our own opinions, and then you in the comments can tell us how much you hate us. But no, I'm going to give it to Paris.
Tell everyone why Matt's wrong.
I think it's not. I mean, Paris did all right on this weekend. But for me, I think it's just what happened at the end left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Obviously, I'm still trying to get a bit more educated, like you were telling me, of what happened in Monaco. Again, although it's been said by a reporter, it's still good to take everything by a pinch of salt, and I don't want to take everything as fact. But obviously, if Max is alluding to certain things that are happening in Monaco, then you can leave it up to your own judgments.
Just hear that? Matt just called me a liar. Can you believe that? Do you not trust my research journalism skills? No, I'm joking.
Absolutely not, because anyone can edit Wikipedia. Okay, on to Alfa Romeo then. Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. Who are you going for?
It's still got to be Bottas. I think he had... did he actually score points? I forget now.
He was P9 in the end, so yes, 2 points.
P9, so good. Finally back in the points a little bit. Double, back-to-back point scores after that horrible run during the middle portion of the season. But there was a hilarious clip, actually, where he was running, I think, behind Zhou, and both of them were running behind Latifi, and he literally basically said, Latifi is slow. Tell Zhou that Latifi is slow, or braking early into turn 10. So he was coaching Zhou because he was seeing how slow Latifi was, like, going around the track. I thought that was hilarious, but yeah, Bottas.
Man. Yeah, I mean, like, also you've got to remember as well, they didn't have a great qualifying. So, like, I'm just looking here for the sprint grid. Zhou was P17 and Bottas was P18. And so then to obviously get up to come up to the grid, and then on the starting grid, then you've got Bottas starting P14, and then Zhou, where is he? I've
13.
lost Zhou. 13. They made up some spots. I'm going to give it to Bottas as well. It's one of the very few weekends where the Alfa Romeo is actually working, which is very good, because I've always said, like, when the car does work, then the drivers can really show off. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed, but yeah, for this one I've got to go to Bottas. Right then, next one we go on to Aston Martin. Actually quite surprising from them, because they got into Lance Stroll's in P10 and Vettel's in P11. It's actually, I gave him a little bit of shit at the beginning of the season, being like, nope, they're just going to flatline. And they are slowly getting better. It's slowly getting more into that top 10 as a regular occurrence. But who are you going for?
There was something that happened at the end of the race that, like, I saw a lot of people say that Seb got a little bit screwed over by the team or something. But as far as, so I don't know what actually happened there, but from the middle portion of the race, like, Seb was absolutely on fire. Like, this car has come alive. I think the team had developed it really well. They had a rough start, of course, but I think Seb did a really good job. I'm not quite sure what happened to him at the end of the race, because he was in that kind of fight for P7, P8. So I'm actually still going to give it to Seb, and purely also, I mean, I know it's not part of the race, but also what Lance did as well in the sprint, I thought it was over the line. But yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened to Seb in the end, but he was fighting, I remember, for some good points. So yeah, maybe a bit of a disappointment, but we're also going into his final race. But yeah, I'm sure he's going to deliver on his final race, whatever car he's given.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. But if I have to pretend to be Hayden Gullis, go on my full Stroll bias here, I would give it to Stroll, because, I left, like, Sebastian Vettel racing room, and, I did finish in the points. If Vettel was quicker, he would have passed
Hayden,
me
is
the
that
race.
you?
Yeah, it's me, Hayden Gullis. Hello, everybody. That's not a really bad impression, actually. Can you do a Hayden impression?
Absolutely not, mate.
I'm Hayden. Go on, give it a try. Give your best.
No,
Hayden
I'm gonna.
Gullis.
Let me do a Tomo one. You did a Hayden. Let me do a Tomo one. I mean, basically, Sebastian, he's just different gravy. Different gravy, mate.
You've got the Tomo script, but you're still saying it as if it's yourself.
Oh, yeah, I can't do a caricature of anyone but other than myself. Brilliant.
Oh dear. Right, let's.
I can do me really well. Does that count?
Absolutely, 100%. He done it. Yeah, that's you.
Box office.
Box office. Let's go on to then. We're just going down the race order here. Let's go to Haas. Tale of two stories. You've got Mick Schumacher finishing P13. Obviously he had a great run in the sprint. Didn't make up too many spots during the race, and then unfortunately Magnussen, being taken up by my driver. Who are you going for? Yeah,
it's still. Well, actually, it's a bit weird to say K-Mag, considering he only did about 2 laps or something. No, less than a lap. I'm feeling a little bit confused, to be honest, about who to pick, but I guess I've got to go Mick Schumacher, because K-Mag only literally did 1 lap, but I mean, still shout out to K-Mag's, qualifying. But yeah, it's weird. We do these head-to-heads, like whether it's, over the course of the entire weekend, I'd say that would be K-Mag, but for the race, obviously, K-Mag not through his own fault, but I was disappointed not to see Mick in the points, because yeah, I feel like his chance of staying at Haas is, it's gone.
Yeah, I think I've got to give mine one to. I think I will give mine to K-Mag, because I think I don't want to sound dismissive on Mick Schumacher. I think going from last to in the sprint, moving up the order, but then didn't move too much further into the race. It's a bit disappointing. Or he didn't start from last, but you know what I mean, back at the grid basically. But yeah, Kevin Magnussen, I'm going to go very much for he did the best he could with that car, and then started in 8th, which
and
even
then
for a
punted.
Haas. And then got punted, which even for a Haas to start, well in the top 10, good enough for me. So that's what I'm going to go with K-Mag. On to then AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. Who are you going for?
I'm still probably going to go with Gasly. Tsunoda was in a really weird kind of situation with the safety car, where he unlapped himself and wasn't allowed to unlap himself again or something like that. So yeah,
well, he moved up I think he moved up a few spots, but then I think it got to the point where he took too long to do so. So then it got to the point where like, okay, safety car is now coming in, so you now just have to hold position. So I think
rough. But to be fair, he moved out of the way really well, because that could have been dangerous, actually, where Yuki was. Like, he moved out of the way, he did the smart thing, so, yeah, shout out to Yuki for being a good back marker, but, yeah, it's still
got to... for not getting in the way.
Exactly. But, yeah, it's still got to be Gasly, although I didn't see too much of Pierre, so I wasn't kind of too sure of his race, but, yeah.
I think I've got to go to Gasly. I think the only time I saw Gasly was when Hamilton was passing him on the start finish straight. But yeah, as you said, a bit of a weird one with Yuki. But going on to then Williams, where we did actually see Nicholas Latifi absolutely going past championship leaders and previous race winners. I just like, there's an onboard clip of Latifi unlapping himself during the safety car period, and people be like, look
at the outside.
Going round the outside. But mate,
and through comes Nicholas Latifi.
Yeah, I mean, fair. I mean, like Albon sort of had like a good sprint race, but then kind of fell off unfortunately during the race. He
had to retire, I think. Albon had to retire, I think, in the sprint because he had an issue.
Yes, he did. Yes, yeah. So who are you going with then?
As if it's any surprise. To be fair, I'm pretty sure Latifi had a shocker in the sprint. Like there was some. I'm not sure if he pitted twice or something, but yeah, it's as if it's a surprise. It's still going to be Alex.
Yeah, I mean, Are
you going to do your classic? Well, I hope Latifi enjoyed the last Brazilian Grand Prix of his life.
I mean, it is going to be the last Brazilian Grand Prix of his life. I mean, it's going to be the last time he's ever going to be racing there. I mean, unless he just wants to be on the simulator crying at home. But yes, I mean, hard burn. What are you going to do, Latifi?
That was out of bounds, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to see what Logan Sargent can do next season.
If he can get the super license points, otherwise it's going to be me.
Yeah, I mean, he did do a running in FP2, I think, to actually now get up the mileage he needs for the extra super license point, which was meant to do at the previous rookie running, but the team unfortunately missed it out by one lap, which was very, very silly. And then I think that's it. Nope, last one, McLaren. Yeah.
I did think there was definitely someone missing. I mean,
nope, no one's missing. We're going to end it there. Nope.
Okay, there we go. He who shall not be named. No, it's going to be. I think Lando was also kind of having a pretty decent race as he usually does in 2022, but
he was doing amazing in qualifying as well. Like there was also in the he's constantly just jumping up the order. Where Ricardo, it's so sad to see Ricardo having this great sort of, well, I say great. I mean, he was racing for like he's racing for like P7 in like Mexico, and then to go from like all that lovely cheering stuff to then go to this, it's like the car is still not working for him and whatnot. So
it's the car. It's the car. Yep, you're right, Matt. It's all the car. Yep.
I mean, I was not going to lie, there was a small part of me that was a little bit worried when Lando did have food poisoning. I'm thinking, okay, if Nick de Vries does come in and completely lap up Ricardo, that's him done, not coming back or anything. But what's your opinion real quick on this with Ricardo? I've very much said that I believe Ricardo is going to go to Red Bull, go back there. It's going to be, talking about egg on my face earlier, that's going to be a huge one for him, obviously leaving the team to go to Renault, to then go to McLaren, then to come back to the old original team as a reserve. I believe the play here is that he's going to be a reserve driver for them next year, and then might be going into a role within AlphaTauri, and then basically that will be where he will finish. Kind of, that's what I would expect. I don't believe that he will go to Mercedes because he'll never ever get the seat up from that unless it was going to like a Williams or what have you. And if he's then very much saying, I want to be back, like, producing great results, not in this sort of thing. That's what I think. What do you think? Where do you think he's going to be going?
Well, first of all, he in 2023, he needs to find the motivation and find out if the hunger is still there to actually come back and try and perform at his best. Because you can't go into Formula One half-hearted, especially after like the last couple of years that he's had. To me, the Red Bull thing is just so bad on all fronts. Like, why would you want to go there for your like own mental sake? In terms of, like, that's the team that you've left, and like. And also, the Red Bull have plenty of young drivers that can be reserves in development. So why would you even want Ricciardo? Like, surely you give one of the younger guys, a chance. So,
well, is it? Well, I mean, to be fair though, it's the conversation has always been.
I'm pretty sure they even have Buemi still, by the way, as like a simulator driver.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's a bit like, well, it again goes back to the conversation of like if AlphaTauri is a sister company of Red Bull, which I don't think is going to be anymore. And although you do have some younger drivers, they don't have that much experience properly under their belt, especially with like Formula 2. I mean, we're seeing so many drivers now being pushed up so quickly. I mean, Yuki Tsunoda is a great example of that, where he literally went from, F3 to F2 to straight into F1, and it's a bit too quick. And that's what we're seeing with Haas. I mean, we do have younger drivers.
But the thing is, for me, it's not about
Nico.
anyone else. It's about Ricciardo at Red Bull. Ricciardo and Red Bull that's not where he should go. In his 1 year off, where he needs to mentally recharge, being at Red Bull, the team that you left, is just bad vibes all around. But it's not nothing to do with any of the drivers. It's just go to Mercedes. Go, if it's possible to go to them, even as a simulator driver for your off year, that to me is better than going to Red Bull, where you have all of this bad history and all of this baggage as well. That I don't think is going to help him.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily bad history. I mean, obviously, that's where he's performed the best at.
And he did ditch them.
And he did ditch them, and that's the thing. And then that's where he will then have to be like, right, well, this is where my mental state has kind of been at, because he obviously left because they were favouring Max Verstappen over him and didn't really quite like that. And also the one season where he was going to be doing really well, the car reliability just fell away from him completely. And that's where he could have, I think that's why he was probably most frustrated, where he was winning so many races, but then anytime he wasn't, the car was breaking down. That was probably one of his best chances.
But it was jokes, because that was 2018 when the car was powered by a Renault power unit. And where did he go?
Yeah. Right, exactly that, yeah. But I mean, at least he can leave his head high at McLaren, being like, well, I won a race, and that's enough. Forget all the other races with them.
How many wins does Lando Norris have? That many.
Well, I mean, hopefully come next year, that it's going to be, hopefully McLaren, hoping it's going to jump up massively as well, and see the developments, or we'll see what with the new driver where they're going to be.
Yeah, I can't wait. Again, Norris and Piastri, that's going to be absolutely amazing. But I think we're going to wrap it up, mate. I think that was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
plenty
absolutely.
of talking points. Again, arguably, actually, really quickly, do you think this was one of the best? This might be the best race of the season, to be honest. Like, up there with Silverstone, I thought that was a really good one as well. But I think this one might have beaten it, to be honest. Where does it rank for you?
I think it's very close to Silverstone. I do think if you were just to look at it in isolation, I think Silverstone was better. But if you look at it from the whole race weekend as a total, because you have the sprint race where we had some nice fun battles in there as well, then I think this does just nip it for me. And so, yeah, actually, you know what? I do turn into mind. I do think, British bias out the window. I think actually, Brazil, this is actually an absolute banger.
Yeah, I think this was my kind of best race of the season, and also just because, again, the result, I don't think any of us really saw it coming, so yeah, I think this has definitely been the race of the season. But yeah, I think that wraps it up for another episode of the F1 Talking Points podcast. Don't forget to give it a like and also subscribe, and we will see you for the final race of the 2022 season. Where has this year gone? At Abu Dhabi. We'll see you there.